The Man Everybody Was Afraid of, a Dave Brandstetter mystery. Book 4 in the series. Author Joseph Hansen. Publisher Open Road Integrated Media, New York. Narrator Eric Aust. Chapter 14. The streetlights died as they drove up Robertson. To the north, hills bulked dark against a smudgy sky. In the empty parking lot, Dave unfolded stiffly from the cramped back seat and crawled out of the little car. The air was cool and moist. There was a hush. Cecil wore black and yellow, wet-look shoes with 2-inch heels. The noise of the heels echoed off the shop fronts. Garden furniture for sale waited behind wrought-iron fences. Chiffoniers loomed in dusky show windows. A huddle of Victorian dolls in a bowed glass cabinet blankly witnessed their 30,000th dawn. Here were the tall carved doors of Doug Sawyer's gallery. Cecil stood in front of the arched window and gazed at the single painting. There, a portrait of Dave. Dave went to the building corner and turned a key in a door. He led Cecil up narrow-walled stairs that he hated to the yawning, half-furnished rooms over the gallery. His bedroom had French doors that opened on a roof deck, jungly, with large tropical plants. The room was wide, long, high-ceilinged. The bare floor was cold. When they stripped and fell into the bed he'd bought big to try to fill up some of the emptiness. When the sun came through the French doors, it came hot and woke him. Cecil lay far off at the edge of the mattress, face down, an arm hanging limp to the floor. Dave left the bed quietly. He wanted the bathroom, but when he opened the door, there were perfumed steam and Christian Jacques in skimpy red underpants. He stood at the wash basin. Shaving cream was on his face. The hand that held the razor stopped moving. He looked at Dave in the foggy mirror. "Good morning," he said. "Excuse me." Dave shut the door and went to his room again. Cecil had rolled onto his back. One leg, lean, black leg, was out of the sheets. Dave sat on the edge of the bed, picked up the phone from the floor, and dialed the hospital. When Amanda came on, he said, "I'm back in L.A. The doctor was waiting for morning. Did Dad wait too?" "He's fine," she said. "I mean, not fine, but they're letting him out of intensive care. He's over the worst part. He's going to get better, Dave." She made a thin sound that wasn't words. "God, isn't this a hell of a time to cry?" "It's better than most," Dave said. "I want to be there, but I don't know how soon I can make it." "I'll wait for you," she said. "We both will." "I hope so," Dave said and hung up. When he'd undressed, he'd dropped wallet, keys, change, cigarette lighter by the phone. He looked at his watch. He lit a cigarette. Behind him, Cecil made a small, protesting noise. The bed moved. Dave half turned. The sun had beaten on the boy as he slept. He was shiny with sweat. He blinked at Dave, smiled a little, ran a lazy fingertip down Dave's ribs. "Go back to sleep," Dave told him. "You've hardly started." "You want me to find that woman?" Cecil said. "It's too early yet," Dave said. "When you're ready, help yourself to a shower and breakfast. I'll leave the car. Key's right here and a key to this place." He worked them off their clips. "Do you need money?" "No." Cecil's eyes fell shut. "Give us a kiss." Dave kissed him. Cecil smiled satisfaction and rolled over again. "Thelma Green," he said into the pillow. "Registered nurse. Find her home address. Go see it, but don't be conspicuous. Look around for a new lavender Montego." He recited the license number. "A red Kawasaki." Dave patted the hard bump in the sheet, made by Cecil's butt. He went to the closet for a short terry cloth robe. "Sleep well," he said, and followed coffee spells down awkward halls to the kitchen. Doug was already dressed, complete with tie. He was laying bacon strips in a skillet. "Add 3 more, please," Dave said. Doug turned. "What did you do? Drive all night?" "I can meet those appointments for you at the pet shop," Dave said, "while you take her to the rest home." "Everything's sold," Doug said. "Only truck drivers will be coming today. The bike shop man will let them in. What about your father?" "It looks like he may make it," Dave said. "I didn't drive. I slept. Somebody else drove. Now he's sleeping." Jacques came into the kitchen in a jumpsuit of crushed gold velvet, open to the navel. A thin gold chain was around his smooth brown throat. His feet were in sandals. They were handsome feet. But he looked wrong without an armload of menus. He said to Dave, "You have a new lover?" "A chauffeur." Doug opened the fridge, put in the bacon package, and took out a box of eggs. "Dave is monogamous." The toaster bell said ding. "Aren't you, Dave?" "Monogamous." Jaquez took a papaya from a basket. A knife from a drawer sliced the papaya in two. "Has that to do with black people?" "Not quite yet," Dave said. He went back to the bathroom. He showered quickly. He'd shave later. He wanted to sit out there under the rubber trees with them at breakfast. Not to make them uncomfortable, to see how uncomfortable it would make him. Yesterday morning he'd have bed, he already knew. Cecil asleep now in his bed suggested he could still surprise himself. Did that ever stop? Carl Brandstetter wore new blue pajamas, but this time the color let him down. It made his eyes look faded and accented the bad blue color of his mouth. Against the hospital pillows and sheets, he looked leached out. The silver sheen was gone from his hair. It was just white and old now. A razor had nicked his jawline. He'd never have done that to himself. He had the voice that actors give board chairmen of multi-million-dollar corporations and managing directors. He was both. But this morning his voice wasn't like that. The force had gone out of it. He said, "If Mrs. Horton covered up for those kids, and then young, what's his name, Jerry, covered up for her, Medallion's off the hook." "If we can prove it." Dave leaned on the foot of the bed next to a little color TV mounted there. He was gloomy, but that ransom note is ashes now. "You booted that," his father said. "You were dying," Dave said. "It distracted me." "Excuses, excuses," his father said. "Carl!" Amanda stood beside the bed in a mock 1927 dress, raspberry color, sash around the hips, loops of long beads, very short skirt. "Dave was with you all night after your attack. He never slept. Then he drove halfway to San Francisco. If he made a mistake..." "Take it easy," Carl Brandstetter said. "He doesn't make mistakes. Not the kind he can't straighten out, but if I didn't criticize, he'd think I was sick." He worked up a smile for Dave. It wasn't the old mocking grin, but it was meant to be. "Forget about the ransom note," he said. "You aren't licensed to steal. Breaking and entering was bad enough. Young Orton was right about that. You don't need the note. Not if you can find those kids." "I'm working on it," Dave said, "but it's a long shot." "You've made those before," his father said. Across the sunny room, Doug, neat in his suit and tie, leaned on the sill with his back to the wide window that showed the tops of locust trees, dense with yellow blossom. He divided his attention between his shoe tops and his watch. He said, "Those are the only kind he likes. 250 miles or more." His look at Dave was brief and bleak. Dave said to his father, "This is a big city to cover alone. I can't get police help. L.A. won't move unless La Calita asks them to, and La Calita isn't about to ask." "Do they think you've left for good up there?" "My car's still at the motel," Dave said, "and I didn't check out of my room. That may bother them enough to give me time, but once they send for them, those kids won't open their mouths. We can bring on 10 lawyers, the district attorney. There belongs to the Ortons, which means a grand jury. No one in Madrone County is going to indict an Orton for anything." Amanda said, "But it was an Orton who was killed." "And they've got a suspect. They can't wait to hang. The dead man's own blue-eyed little girl. Never." "Insular," Carl Brandstetter said. "I met them years ago, Homer Noel and that bunch, when I was married to Helena. We dragged a 2-horse trailer all the way to Sangre de Cristo for some Palomino show. Ranchers, growers, Cadillacs, Cessnas, $500 cowboy boots. They can get ugly with each other about who has the most silver mounting on a saddle. But I judged that if anything threatened any one of them, they'd close ranks." "Was that where we went?" Dave said. "That's right. You were along. Insisted on stopping to look at the fish cannery. Helena didn't like it. Didn't like much that wasn't a horse. She called you the colt. I'd forgotten that. Dave grinned. I wondered if she called you Stallion. Carl Brandstetter snorted. She called me a lot of things toward the end, but never Stallion. No. Alarm widened his eyes suddenly, and he began groping frantically at the side of the bed. Dave knew what for. The oxygen tube he'd torn off when the nurse had left. Now the nurse was back, stout and angry. This has gone on far too long, she snapped. Mrs. Brandstetter, I'm surprised at you. She fished up the waxy tube and taped it firmly across Carl Branstetter's upper lip. This is a sick man with a very tired heart. She glared at Amanda, at Dave, even at Doug. Out, please. Dave touched his father's shoulder. His father caught his wrist, pulled him close. A thermos of martinis, he hissed, and a carton of Benson Hedges. And in case those don't do it, Dave asked, a gun? You wouldn't refuse a dying man's last request. Only to keep him alive. Dave went to the door the nurse was holding open. She was Japanese, and her scowl made her look like a demon guarding a Kyoto temple. Amanda and Doug were already in the hall. Don't do anything reckless, Carl Brandstetter said. It's only money, you know. Go carefully with that black boy. What? Dave turned. Who? The one who killed Orton Green, isn't it? Oh, that black boy, Dave said. I will. A wire mesh fence flared with wine-bright bougainvillea. Outside one window, outside the other, a wisteria vine with a twisted trunk thick as a tree shaded a patio. On one of the rooms, white walls, Doug had hung a big colored plate of dogs of the world that used to hang in Sawyer's pet shop. He'd given it a new frame and a new glass, curtains, bedspread, carpet. The covers on the chairs were cheerful oranges and yellows. The room still looked institutional in a new cotton print dress and a white button sweater. Belle Sawyer stood small by the door and blinked at the room through a thick lens with her one bright eye. The other lens was pasted over with cloth. She'd lost an eye to a hawk's claw years ago. Her hair had always been frizzy. Today it was neatly set, and that added to the strangeness. The thing that took away from the strangeness, a ukulele, was that she held a cage with birds in it, two small green parrots with rosy faces and blue rumps. They shrieked and whistled. She looked at Doug and Dave over the cage and said, I do have my rational times, you know, when I know who I am and where I am. I'm not going to like this place. I want my animals. Doug took the cage from her. I don't like it any better than you do. He set the cage by a window. But it was the only place where they'd even let the birds in. Never mind, she said. They're lively. Doug gazed out the window. You can see the hills. I will lift up mine eyes, she said. The stout woman with brassy hair who ran the place came out of her office as they passed. I hope the other guests don't complain, she said. Those birds are terribly noisy. Inside the office and back of her were artificial flowers and a big artificial portrait of Jesus. Doug looked at it and then up at the hot blue sky. A mockingbird shouted from a television antenna in the ferny leafage of the wisteria. A gang of sparrows quarreled. Doug said to the woman, just like the ones out here. He gave her a smile and turned for the patio entryway. They're praising God, he said. In the car, he twisted the ignition key and revved the engine angrily. There's an instinct in people. Barnyard. One of them begins to bleed. They can't wait to attack. He kicked the brake and jerked the car into traffic. God damn it. I should have closed the gallery and kept the pet shop running for her till she dies. This can drag on for years, Dave said. The doctor told you. She knows it. She wouldn't let you. How could she stop me? Doug drove 2 blocks in grim silence and stopped for a light. Shrill little kids in bright colors swarmed over the blacktop of the school playground. Doug said, the gallery's nothing but a faggot game, even if it was making money. The pet shop was her life. The signal light changed to green, and he swung the car sharply down a side street. Where are you going? Dave asked. Back to get her out of there, Doug said. The pet shop's gone, Dave said. So is the house, remember? Look, Doug, this is old age, illness. Nothing you can fight. Not and win. In this kind of bind, there are no heroes, no villains. There are only victims. Oh, shut up, Doug said dully. You haven't seen many endings, Dave said. In my line of work, I've seen hundreds. They're never neat. That place looks decent. It's nearby. You can visit her. I'll be the only one, Doug said. A shop like that. Your friends come during business hours. Friends! They've already forgotten her. He glanced at Dave. There were tears in his eyes. You're a sententious jerk. There are two villains, and I don't like the role. Don't accept it, Dave said. It's miscasting. Doug dodged a bicycle. And what I hate about it most is that tomorrow I won't hate it as much. And next week, or next month, I'll hardly remember. He was crying now. Pull over, Dave said. I'll drive. When they reached the parking lot in Robertson, it was nearly full. The rental car was there, still, or again. Dave checked his watch. 10 past noon. He walked with Doug on the street, past shops, now open for business, with peacock chairs, knitted Afghans. Franklin stoves sat out on the sidewalks in the sun. Music drifted from an open door. Doug asked, What kind of pre-Columbian figures? West Coast, Dave said. Kalima, Chalesco, Nariette. Classic period. The Nariette are the deformed ones, right? Hunchbacks. Women with misshapen skulls. Terracottas, Doug said. Polychrome finish? Across the street, a miniature brown youth wrapped in a long white apron sloshed water from a bucket across the sidewalk in front of the bamboo raft and used a push broom to sweep last night's stains into the gutter. Big ones, Dave said. Glossy. Doug pushed his key into the blue door. He was shaking his head. And La Calida of all places. The door opened and his voice echoed up the stairs. A new gallery, you said. Who's their backer? What millionaire? They is a woman. Dave followed Doug up the stairs. It's more than a business arrangement. Her backer is the local police chief. At least was. The murdered one? You didn't say he was wealthy. He wasn't. He worked for a living. Doug's short laugh was sharp on the narrow stairs. No wonder he's dead. Dave, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. He must have been crooked as hell. They reached the top step. Mexico won't let them out of the country anymore. And there just aren't that many floating around loose. Faint sounds of guitar and bongo drifted from the big hollow room where the stereo equipment sat on bare flooring. An old Cal Shadar album. Dave didn't look in there. He followed Doug to the sun-bright kitchen. Doug said, Museums hang on to the ones they're lucky enough to own. He dropped ice cubes into a tall glass. I think it's museums she's selling to, Dave said. Doug dumped vodka over the ice. Not many private collectors have that kind of money. The one who unloaded this batch has. Now. Doug made a skeptical noise. It was a damn secret transaction. He brought a pitcher of tomato juice from the fridge. You know how hard I've been looking? There was no announcement, catalog auction, not even any gossip. Look no further, Dave said. Drive up there. With whose life savings? Doug poured tomato juice after the vodka and set the pitcher back. Maybe there's one with a chip out of it, Dave said. Isn't it early to start boozing? You already cried. Doug tilted Worcestershire sauce into the glass, spun the ice cubes with a finger, kept his back to Dave. Right, this was in case you started talking about us. What is there left to say? Dave asked. Doug turned around. You really don't give a damn, do you? About Christian walking in and finding him here. And before him, Kovacs, Dave said, and before him, the mechanic from European Motors. I used to think you only did it to get my attention. I don't think so anymore. Maybe I gave up, Doug said. There was no call to start, Dave said. Hills knocked in the hall and Cecil came in. I found her, he said. The sunlight made the yellow pants and jacket shine. Like you said, nothing to it. Phoned the State Board of Nursing and stepped in the car. She isn't even far away, a few miles south, down that next big street, La Sedega. Doug Sawyer? Dave said. Cecil Harris. He watched them shake hands. Doug sulky, Cecil weary. Dave asked, What's it like? The car there. The motorcycle? Apartment buildings. Set in a park. Trees. Lawns, flower beds. Black now, but it hasn't been black long. Streets were chitterlings, and a market window still looks wrong. Her type when it gets so people know it's a black neighborhood. They move on out. He gave Dave a sly smile. You never thought I'd be conspicuous. No way. Dave grinned. Feel used, do you? Cecil laughed. The far-off record was still playing. He snapped his fingers to the beat. Shoulders and hips twisted, he crossed the kitchen to the open roof deck doors. I felt so inconspicuous among all those darling pickaninnies. Off to school on their $50 skateboards, I went right up and rang the lady's doorbell. I'll be in the gallery, Doug said and left. Cecil blinked. He can't be jealous. What about the island, Queen? Dave listened cheerfully to the clatter of Doug's heels down the stairs. Don't worry your pretty head, he said. You can't tell the players without a program. What did Thelma Green say? She was dressed up in her nurse's outfit, and she had her coat over her arm. About to go to work. I said Lester was a friend of mine from school. Told me to look him up. She said she didn't know anything about it. He wasn't there, but I saw a duffel bag on the floor just inside the door, and she is definitely not the kind of lady that would travel with a duffel bag. So you waited until she left and went back. They've got this security guard so old, all that holds him up is the starch in his uniform. But he kept after me like I was about to rip off every TV in the place. I went back to the car, drove up and down streets, wasted my time and your gas. The Kawasaki was how they got down here to L.A. all right, but it wasn't where I could find it. Then how do you know? Dave said. Where is it? I got thirsty, Cecil said. Stopped at the local liquor store for a Coke. Lots of excitement. Seems the place got knocked over last night. Black boy with a beard and a fat girl with long blonde hair. They had a little snub-nosed police revolver, you know? Everybody on the floor, all that. They cleaned up the cash drawer and ran for their little red motorcycle, but right then a black and white just happened to come around the corner. So, I guess where we find it now is the police garage, right? A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.